Hello, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. I'm one of your hosts, Randy Dauphin, and I'm joined today by one of my senseis, Sensei Nicholas Suino, and we were just talking about and congratulating him on becoming a 7th dan in judo very recently, in addition to his 8th dan in the Iaido. And we are once again joined with our good friend, Sensei George Rego. He is the chief instructor at the Jukido JuJitsu Academy, and that's located in Florida. He's a 5th dan and also a 3rd dan in Taekwondo Karate. Sensei Rego has competed in many tournaments, and he's a 7-time gold medalist in the International Karate Association, SHIAI. Back in 2015, he became the AAU National Freestyle Judo Champion in the Masters Lightweight division. And, you know, Sensei Legacy is one of our co-hosts and creators of that show. Like Sensei Legacy and Sensei Suino, Sensei Rego is an author of the book, The Founder of Jiu-Jitsu and Judo in America, which accounts how Japanese fighting arts made their way to the United States. I've read that book. That's a good book. I want to get in the same room with Sensei Rego so I could get it autographed, because I have lots of books and I really enjoy. I think it's good when you know the author, you know something more of the book, if you can have a personal relationship with an author. And Sensei Rego is a very, very passionate martial artist. If you didn't see our long form PKCC where we delved into his history and background, I encourage you to go and look at that. And how you doing today, Sensei Rego?
I'm doing great, man. I'm blessed. Like we were talking before we went live. I'm the luckiest guy I know. Happy to be talking to you guys. Honored to have the invitation again. And things are good at the dojo. Things are good at with the family. And what else could you ask for? So, and I'm talking to these handsome gentlemen. So I'm happy and ready to go. That's right.
I thought somebody snuck in my dojo.
Yeah.
So, Suino, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Living the life, working my butt off, and training a lot, and having some. The folks at JMAC are doing so well. You know, our senior leadership cadre is taking so much responsibility at JMAC. They're training. I love hearing the principles that I've been espousing for years and years coming out of their mouths in front of the other students. You know, and then the next generation being positive, working hard, wanting to make martial arts better, making themselves better. You know, I keep saying, I think martial arts is one of the best things a human being can do. You know, yes, the fighting, but everything else that goes with it, the culture, the arc of life that takes you from someone who may not be that confident or that sure of yourself. And then as you go through and first you make yourself better, and then you make the people around you better. And what a privilege to be involved in it. Here we are.
Yeah. On that topic, Sensei, I know the topic today that we're going to talk about is you had looked at Sensei Rego's website and pulled a quote off of there. But really what we want to talk about today is training for realistic self-defense versus just training, right? Just training. But before we do that, you were saying that, and it's funny because you've said that now about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Sensei Rego, is this notion that I have in my brain, which maybe it's wrong, but I was trying to think about cultural activities in countries that have transcended the globe. And you know, if you think about food and drink, you can think a lot of them, right? Like a lot, like, you know, everybody knows Mexican food, Italian food, like the various cultures that spreads everywhere and everybody enjoys it. But I really was hard pressed to try and think of something out. Maybe it's just because my scope is so narrow, but I think Asian martial arts is one of those things that has just transcended the globe. Like it's everywhere now. It's everywhere.
No, I think you're right. I mean, martial arts, particularly, you know, despite and this is not poo-pooing anything, but despite, you know, kind of the trends of modern martial arts and MMA and all that stuff, I mean, the traditional martial arts continue to just be pervasive around the globe, and people connect to it really, really deeply. And as Suino Sensei pointed out, you know, thank God for that, because it is one of the most powerful vehicles that we have for of course, I'm always very, very self-defense oriented, but I agree, beyond just the physical capacity to to defend oneself, the culture, the discipline, the accountability to seniors, the mentorship. I love what Suino Sensei said just a moment ago, to hear your students espousing the same things that you're putting out. Like, how much more, that's the most rewarding thing a sensei could ask for. Going, not only are they delivering it, but they're delivering it well. They're delivering it the way I'd want to be delivered. Maybe that's in some capacity that they're taking an angle that's even better or improved, or just a slightly different take, but the essence of the thing is the same. And you can, that's what the tradition is about, because we are, we're only here for a short time, and to know that, to be at that point in life where you go, I think it's going to be okay. My life's work, I can see in this next generation that it's going to be passed forward, like Funakoshi said, straight and well. It's going to keep perpetuating forward, despite the ups and downs of, martial arts fads or culture or whatever. That classical approach continues to press forward in time, and to be a small part of contributing to that continuity is, I mean, just what a privilege is, right? And I'm so happy to hear Suino Sensei say that, because that's what we all are aiming for, I think, as teachers.
Let's stay on this topic just for a little bit, because I think we got the right guy on the call. I think Sensei Rego is perfect for this topic. Let's stay on this for a little bit. I got two thoughts on this. One is, years ago, I was in a mentorship group for dojo owners, and we were helping each other try to grow. And one of my friends, Dan Vigil, who ran a Taekwondo school here in Southeast Michigan for a while, he's the first guy to say this to me. He said, martial arts was the first personal development system. And I was a time when I was paying a lot of attention to Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, Deepak Chopra, and I stopped. It made me stop. What? And he said, yeah, think about it. When the samurai had to, you're telling a bunch of guys, you got to go out there with swords and stand within 3 or 4 feet of people. You're going to die. They're going to die. You're going to get horribly maimed, but it's for the sake of society. And so we're not only going to teach you to fight better, we need you to think better, right? We need to give you Zen principles. We need to give you tactics. And out of that arose this idea that you can make yourself a better human being, in part through combative training. So that was cool. That was when I first started thinking about how what we do is about fighting, but it's not about fighting, right? And then a much more modern influence is, there's the guy Alex Hormozy, who's a very successful entrepreneur, and he's got a big presence online. And he's one of those no-nonsense bro science guys. He's really out there. He's made a ton of money. He likes to state things in strong terms. And he said, I don't know, I'm gonna massacre the quote, but I think you'll get the idea. He said, it's silly to stand in front of the mirror spouting affirmations to yourself. Instead, what you want to do is go out and amass a stack of proof that you are who you say you are. And I just love that, because that's what we do in martial arts, right? You say, I'm going to be a badass in martial arts. I'm going to do my kata 1,000 times. I'm going to do 100 push-ups a day. I'm going to do the 75 hard. I'm going to do the JMAC Crucible, right? You do that shit and you look back and you go, okay, the last year was amazing, right? Okay, what am I going to do today to prove to myself and to others that I am who I say I am? And, I don't need to prove it anymore. You guys don't need to prove it anymore, but we still do it because that's the lifestyle we live.
I'm thinking about when you talk about it being, I've always kind of got my back up sometimes, Sensei, when you've said about martial arts being a self-help, because my mind goes to like these guys on boats, like with cash, saying like, hey, like 10 easy steps and you'll be a billionaire, or whatever that is. And I've never thought of martial arts as that, but like today, a little more lights have gone on when you've been talking about that, right? And so one of the things I've always admired about very specifically Japanese culture is they believe always and deeply that the sum is greater than the whole, like the whole is greater than the individual, right? So they're all about like, we make up a great nation and we work together to make a great nation. But I think you want the pieces to be as good as they possibly be to make that up. And the other thought that was rattling around in my head is just, I started thinking about previous guests that we had on, even just our last show where it was, hey, nobody owns karate. Nobody owns martial arts. Nobody is the authority on martial arts. Nobody, and it helps everybody, I think, in similar ways and also in different ways, right? Everybody gets more confident to some degree or another. everybody, you know, gets more compassionate to some degree or another if you're in the right dojos. The athleticism is something that you get better at, but there's more God-given talents sometimes that you can't overcome. What's going on in your brain, Sensei Rego?
Listen, I mostly just that I wholeheartedly agree, you know, with both of you. I see where Suino Sensei is coming from, but I also catch the little, you know, the self-help guru, you know, cliche, you know, you start to resist that a little bit, but I think ultimately, you know, unless we're just, you know, squabbling about words and the words that come to the impression that comes to our mind, I think it's right, and I think it's completely right, you know, that again, it almost sounds cliche, but that mind, body, spirit, you know, where you're developing martial arts is just such a when done right, in my view, that overall balance, right? Where you're not just, you know, an intellectual a warrior, you know, or a poet or a painter or something, that they're or you're not just kind of some Spartan badass, you know, warrior Viking guy, but the coming together of the sword and the pen, you know, that idea of mind, body, spirit. There's nothing quite like the you know, I'm biased towards Japanese martial arts, but the martial arts as a whole to yeah, you can be the physical badass, but you have to be this you're aiming towards this character development aspect, not only in terms of your character, in terms of how you develop in terms of your interactions with the world, but as Suino Sensei pointed out, your ability to look in the mirror and go, am I the guy who I say I am, or that I'm encouraging others to be, that leading from the front, I think is just so important. And there's the martial arts, again, properly done. And there's not just one way, but in the main, properly done, I think there's no vehicle like it. You know, we're all a bit biased, but I think it's true.
Yeah, I think it helps you get out of the gap. Like the gap for me is, you know, what you want to be able to do compared to what you actually can do, like, or what you know you're capable of doing compared to what you're actually can do today. And a lot of people, I think, live in the gap of that. Like, and that's where you'll hear Sensei Legacy say, oh, a lot of people are just think they're better than they actually are.
Yeah.
And that's because they're living in that gap. And I think good martial artists don't live in that gap. They're like, no, not today. I'm not rolling today. I can't roll today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm going to be able to roll because I'll be there. But today I'm here and I can't. And yeah, that's a lesson I've learned from Sensei Legacy. And I think real martial artists don't live in that gap as much.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, and listen, you know, all self-help stuff aside, I mean, the martial arts literally changed my life in countless ways, and I'm sure you guys can point to those ways in your own lives too. So it's like, and I have hundreds of case studies, right? You know, among my students and the people I know, of people who came into martial arts. One person went out, you know, 5 years, 10 years later, completely different people, better people, more self-actualized people. Some of that might have happened anyway. I don't know. But I just see it over and over again. And just to kind of turn us towards the topic of the day, our vehicle for that, a tool for our self-development is martial arts. We don't just talk about it all the time, right? Without the physical training, we wouldn't be able to have the gains that we have.
It's interesting that you say that, and I'm sure you both have. I don't know about you, Sensei Rego, but I'm in JMAC on the regular. Like I'm in there 20 times a year, 30 times a year. Yeah. So I know the students fairly intimately. I see the young students growing up in there and the changes in them. But you know, when parents come in, they're usually really blunt about the goals they want for their kids. Like, and it's often not what the kids' goals are. Those two things are often different. And I find a lot of adults come in and they hide their goals a little bit in the beginning. They give you the same ones. But when the parents come in and they say to me, my kid's really shy, is martial arts going to help them not be shy? I'm like, yeah. Or the next parent comes in and they say, my kid's a bully. They pick on everybody. They get in fights all the time. Is it going to help them become a little more compassionate? I'm like, yeah, it is 100%. You know, whatever the vehicle is. And they're like, well, how are you going to do that? And then I look at them and smile and say, I'm going to teach them how to fucking fight. And they're going to know how to fight really good. And they're like, well, how will that help? I'm like, Well, they're going to get punched in the head quite a few times, and then they're going to get compassionate because they're going to realize that getting hit in the head actually hurts, and you don't want to do that, right? I said, they're going to get brave because they're going to know that when I back up, I get my butt kicked even worse than when I step forward, right? They're going to get more disciplined because they're going to realize that if they don't practice their basics and they don't do these things, when they get in the situation where they have to apply them, it's going to be for naught. I said, so that's my vehicle for self-help, is teaching them how to fight.
Isn't there something so beautiful about, I agree with you totally. I've always felt that what we do, it has this just borderline magical ability, right? In the sense that if you have a shy, meek kid, you're not that you're turning him into kind of some a stereotypical alpha male tough guy, super aggressive, but they learn how to assert themselves over time. It brings them up in a sense. But on the flip side, if you have, a kid who's a little rough around the edges, maybe his ego's a little out of control, maybe he's physically a bit out of control. For that kid, the same classical process has the way of bringing him down a little bit, mellowing him a little bit. Chill out. Control your movement, control your mind and your emotions in a hard randori or a kumite or something. Bring it down a little bit. And you're, of course, every student you're interacting with, particularly with children, some kid needs the drill sergeant. Another kid needs the gentler approach. But the basics are the basics, and the foundations are the foundations. And essentially you're following the same process, and you're centering people to a more balanced point, bringing the for lack of a better phrase, the weaker ones and making them stronger, and taking the stronger ones and bringing them down to a place where they're applying that energy in a more controlled and productive way, and following the same process. So no matter what the parent tells you, Sensei Dauphin, it's like, well, they're shy or they're a bully. Well, I'm going to follow the game plan. I'm going to follow the process because the process works.
Yeah. Before Sensei, I know I can see him nodding. I know he's got thoughts on this. I can almost read his mind. But I just want to say, what I call that, Sensei Rego, to people in here, I tell it to my instructors. I say, I call that the meat grinder. Doesn't matter what kind of meat you put into a grinder.
Yeah,
if
right.
It's fine veal or great steak or chopped liver, when you start turning the handle, it all comes out ground meat, right? So
that's good. That's really good. I like that. I'm going to steal that.
What do you think it says, Suno? Because I know it's a lot.
Well, I was just talking to Big Don Pryor at breakfast about smash burgers, so we're not far off. Not far off on that topic. Spiritual forging, right? Hammering metal. You make a sword, you go find really high quality sand, you smelt the iron out, you start hammering that iron and heating it, you introduce carbon into it, you hammer, end up with a really fine, assuming the smith is good and the materials are good, you end up with a really fine katana blade. And obviously there are different raw materials in human beings, right? You have some people that are wired up athletes, the really, really finest metal. They're going to make the finest combative athletes. But here's something that's absolutely wonderful about martial arts that I love, and it relates to our question on Punch Kick Choke Chat, right? When we ask people in our 10 questions, we say, if you could give everybody the benefit that you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what would it be? And what I found over the years is it doesn't matter what raw material comes in, whether they're athletic or unathletic, whether they have a fast mind or a slow mind. If they stick with their training, they're going to get so many of the benefits, right? Like enlightenment is available to everyone, no matter how much of a quality athlete they are. They're going to get calmer. They're going to get more focused. They're going to build a social group. They're going to have disciplined thoughts. If they stick with it and they have the desire to move forward, they'll get those. Some will become Olympians, right? Others will become people that come in and struggle every day at the dojo. But the other benefits, the side benefits, the stuff we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, that stuff can come regardless of what kind of more raw meat, you start with. You're still going to have an output worthy of the effort.
On that note, I think we should move towards our topic, because I think we've been dancing around it a little bit. And the topic of the day is training for realistic self-defense or just training. And so the one question I want to ask both of you is, what is realistic self-defense? Like, I mean, we should, if that's our topic, we should say what we feel realistic self-defense is. So Setsuna, why don't we start with you?
I would normally jump right in here because I have no problem running my mouth, but I really want to hear, having seen that quote on Sensei Rego's site, I want to hear what he has to say first. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pass this to you.
Conversation.
Yeah, so for me, the idea of realistic self-defense it's actually quite broad, right? Because for me, I think like, what's the best way to say this? I think that the classical old school approach basically had it right, in the sense that, I mean, it's in the word martial art. It's a combative art. And so they never were separating themselves too far from real world situations. The problem is, or not the problem, but the reality of realistic self-defense is that a sexual assault or a bully situation in a playground or a law enforcement personnel having to deal with, all of those kind of fall under the umbrella of a real world encounter, not a dojo encounter or a sport encounter. And those things aren't bad, but I think it's more about having that filter of how would this apply in the real world, in real world environments, real world, on the concrete with obstructions in the way, the legal ramifications of what's going on. And so, I don't know if I'm getting to the heart of what you're looking for, but I just think that we can't separate ourselves too far from, I'll give you a more tangible example that maybe Suino Sensei would, and I practice this technique too, so I'm not, don't misread me here. But you see, let's say a judoka throw someone real hard, real fast, and then they'll roll over the guy. Like from a realistic self-defense standpoint, I don't care for that training habit. I want you to throw the guy and do everything in your power to stay upright, right? So for example, if you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with Sambo scoring, which is obviously like, Russian judo with an attitude kind of a thing, right? They score what we would call an ippon, a full throw. They don't award the equivalent, I don't know what they call it, a golden score, an absolute or whatever, for example, unless you remain standing at the end. So for me, although that's a combat sport, it's one step closer. It's a bit more connected to the habit that you want to cultivate for realistic self-defense. And so if I'm dropping down on my knees every time I do a seonagi, like how would that apply on concrete? How are my kneecaps going to do with that? So it's not that I can't throw someone. It's just that technique, if it becomes too much of a habit, it's like that's a mat habit. You feel way too comfortable just flinging yourself onto your knees because the mat is always there. And so as much as it is like biomechanics are the same, it's the mindset that's different. The way you generate power for a punch or turn in for a throw is the same whether you're in the dojo or on the street. But the kind of the mental filter that you're applying as you're watching these things, why would I roll over? Is it just for cool points? Could I have remained standing so that I could pop that guy one when I'm done? Am I habitually dropping to my knees, really, really hard when, maybe I could have done something a little bit more I could have done something where I'm applying the filter of a real world environment and achieving similar results without potentially wrecking my knees. So I don't want to filibuster, but these are just kind of, as I'm thinking out loud in real time.
Yeah, I like what you said as you started talking about how the idea of self-defense is a very broad one. I used to do a lot of tactical shooting, and in training there, you recognize quickly that there's, how do you draw your pistol when somebody is 6 feet away from you and deploy it? Or what if you're in a gun battle and somebody is 20 feet away from you? Or, an apocalypse breaks out and you have a 100-meter gun battle with your AR-15, or, you're a sniper in war and you're shooting at 600 yards. Those are all extremely different situations, and there's different skill sets, right? In our martial arts, it's the same thing. If somebody is trying to sexually assault you or steal your wallet or abduct you, or there's a bunch of people out just, wilding and they want to knock you out. Those all call for different specialty skills. And it makes me think about the mindset. The mindset is really important in all of those, right? That you have awareness, that you're able to create a plan very quickly, that you have an OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, act. You got to practice all that stuff, but you also have to think about the mindset. You also have to run scenarios. And that's one of the differences. I'll pause it. I'll suggest that, and we can take that apart. One of the big differences between just training, and I don't believe there's any such thing as just training, but just training and training specifically for self-defense. I think mindset may be one of the most important aspects. Randy, what do you got on that?
Well, it's funny because you said mindset, and I really liked what Sensei Rego said. He said mindset, and he also said mental filter. I like the idea of a mental filter because it means your mindset or your mental filter needs to be changed and addressed and checked periodically, because your body's going to go along with where your mind goes. And so I just read this book. If you haven't read it, I encourage people to read it. It's called The Gift of Violence. I can't remember the author, but it really helped with my mental filter. And I'm always looking for things that are going to help with that mental filter. So one thing, training for realistic self-defense will have less rule sets, in my opinion. As soon as you start like adding more and more rule sets into, you can do this, you can't do that, you have to be on your knees, you have to be standing. Listen, I do traditional karate and I do BJJ, and there's really strict rule sets, right? You're a white belt, no ankle locks, no wrist locks. You're a blue belt now. But those are just things that are kind of made up by us for safety and training, but that's not realistic, right? If you're training for self-defense, then you're talking about not combat against another martial artist per se. You're talking about combat probably against an untrained individual. And then who would that be? I'm a big proponent of asking people when they come in here, why would somebody attack you and where would you be when you got attacked? I just ask those questions. Like, it should be different for a 16-year-old girl than it would be for a 45-year-old hyper fit male. Like, those would be, the answer to that question would be uniquely different for both of them. And then they need to train still though for a physical confrontation with no rule set. I guess another thought I have is the techniques, high percentage techniques versus low percentage techniques. That's why most good martial arts systems have a core curriculum of basics. And when you look at them, those are high percentage techniques, right? The core blocks in karate, they're going to serve you well if you know how to do them well. They're going to serve you well. A good straight front kick, a good reverse punch, an elbow. These are high percentage techniques. A jump, spinning, wheel kick to the head in January in Canada on an icy sidewalk is not, I'm not saying don't train it. It has its place, but it's not a high percentage technique. So those are some of the things that I'm vomiting out. And I'm also thinking about what we talked about with Sensei Pankovic the other night. Sensei Legacy said something. He said, Okinawa was the proving ground for karate. It was the proving ground for karate. And then when you look at the politics of the time when it was being developed, of course, there's very lawless time. And then it was lawless again in World War II. And so their mindset when they were training was about that. And I guess the final thing I'll end on, since, is that Asian culture is uniquely different than our Western culture. We go to church to build our spirit. We go to school to become educated, and we go to the dojo to get physically fit and learn how to fight. I believe that in Japan, that's just inherent in you bring your body, mind, and spirit everywhere you go, not just to the temple for your spirit, not just to the dojo for your body, not just to school for your education. It's all encompassing everywhere there.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the things we admire. Yeah, we admire about that culture. And I was just talking to somebody about that in terms of food, right? Restaurateurs, right? When you go to a small family-owned restaurant in Japan, that's their life. And it's not just their career, it's their mission, right? Their path. And that's why things are so elegant and well done in most places. Not, of course, 100% of the time, but that's that's the thing you pay attention to.
Can I jump in there real quick?
Yeah, Sensei Rego, I was going to turn it over to you. What do you got for us?
Yeah, no, I just it's more just kind of piggybacking on what Sensei Dauphin was saying about the core curriculum, right? Of martial art, the basics. I actually think that this is an idea that I'm harping on all of the time, is that it's actually, I think the idea of kind of the real world application and the basics, those are one and the same idea. It's the same. This is the stuff that really, really works. It's not that the spinning back kick doesn't work. It has its place. But if I'm teaching a 30-year-old soccer mom, and in this hypothetical crazy mind experiment, I go, in 6 weeks, for sure she's going to be attacked. There's nothing I can do to stop it. She just is going to be able to she's going to have to defend herself. At what point am I teaching her a flying, Yoko Tobigare, jumping side kicker? I'm not teaching her any of that. And so when you boil it down to that kind of, hey, your daughter's going to get attacked in 2 months and there's not jack shit you can do about it other than train her until that point. What are you going to teach her? Is it Barambolos? Is that what you're going to teach her? I don't think so. It's not going to be that, right? And so that classical idea of combat and the basics is in some sense the same idea. I don't know if that's psychobabble, but those, and then we kind of get like, or we can get, I mean that from the biomechanical standpoint, right? Like the basics, the anatomy of how to break a shoulder or choke a neck or use your hip to hit someone. That is the core of the physical skill set. Then it's the mindset that you apply to those basics. But if your mindset is somewhere else, or you don't constantly reapply that filter, now you're doing real techniques, but maybe not at a real distance, or the exchanges are very, very prolonged. Do I need a 7-move combo? I don't know if that idea of tying the classical mindset of realism and the basic technique, it's actually one. My sensei used to say an advanced technique is just a basic one done thousands and thousands of times, right? It's not a black belt technique. It's just a black belt doing the technique. They're doing it at a black belt level. And that I think that idea is something that I'm constantly hammering home to my people all the time. And I think that's, yes, the mindset of realism in terms of thinking about different scenarios. And, at my dojo, we actually do fairly regularly. We'll do traditional training, but we'll do it like Sensei Suino, for example, we'll do like, let's say uchikomi, right? But now instead of, collar and sleeve, you're doing it from a punch, and we do the uchikomi outside in the parking lot. Just so you have that, you're just taking the guy up in a throw, and you don't throw him, but you go, man, that just feels different. I've been falling my whole life. I know how to take ukemi, but even when I'm up there, I'm going, oh man, it gives you a new perspective. On the mat, I don't even think about it. I just take the fall. And then just kind of, if you can't apply the filter, sometimes you have to take the dojo outside and go, no, we're going to start this arm lock, this Jujigatami from the guard on your back on the pavement. Let's go. It changes it. I don't know that I want to be hanging out over here. I'll make it work. I have to make it work, but I'm not just going to slap fist bump and lay on my back. It's not happening. Anyways.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely.
I was just going to say last night, you'll like this, Rego Sensei. My wife and I were doing the 75 hard program, and you have to do one of the components is doing one workout outside every day, right? And here last night, the temperature went from plus 13 at 8 a.m. to negative 12 by 7 o'clock when we had to start training. And we trained outside here in the dojo. And I had this little loop. And when we got here, we did our kata. When we got here, we did these basics. When we got here, we did this thing. And my wife said to me, wow, it's so different doing my front kick with my boots on and my mittens on and my coat on and it's so different. And I got to be honest, as a person who's been in martial arts for like 36 years, I was like, this doesn't feel different to me. It just kind of feels the same. Like I just feel like the same person out here on the sidewalk with my my boots on as I do when I put my karate uniform on and go. I don't really have this like hard distinction in my brain anymore. I think maybe I'm one of the sick individuals who likes discomfort though. So
Well, A, you're crazy, and B, you've been doing this a long, long time. But that's part kind of the magic that Sensei Rego, you alluded to earlier. You know, you teed this up with the idea that somebody needs to know self-defense in 2 months or 6 months. Or another way to think about it is even if they don't need it in 2 months, most people are dabblers, right? People call me up for a self-defense class and I say, okay, you know, fair enough. I'll get your sorority in here for 6 hours on a Saturday.
Right.
That's cool, but that ain't going to do it. Like, I'll give it to you, and I know that's all you're going to do, but what you really should do is train more. The magic is when you are somebody who comes in over and over, when you have an access, you know, have access to somebody like you guys as senseis to do training in the dojo, to do real world training, to train in your boots outside. And it highlights something, which is maybe that spinning back kick is a good technique for somebody who's been doing martial arts for 30 years. It probably isn't, but my point is there are techniques available to you, or levels of technique available to us, because we do this all the time. We have these scaffolded skill sets. And it's something I talk to my students about all the time. I always have this thing. They can repeat it back to me now. I say that's because this is what? Training, not what? Fighting. This is not fighting. This is training. And there are a lot of things we do in the classical game that probably aren't obvious, right? Why are we doing this move? It feels really awkward, sensei. On day 1, on day 10, on day 100. Some stuff 3 or 5 years later, or you might be struggling with your whole career. But when you train it for the long term, you're building a skill set that you can apply that's not available to someone, no matter how athletic they are. They're going to come into a self-defense class, and in 2 months, they're going to be athletic and strong and driven. But you can be transformative over a year, over 3 years, over 5 years, and do stuff that it was not available to you in any way, shape, or form, both mentally and physically. So that to me is really fascinating, because yes, realistic training for self-defense has to happen quickly, and it has to stay simple, and it is classical, but also the magic of the long term, right, gives you access to techniques and ability levels and techniques that you can't even conceive of in 2 months or 6 months. And those two coexist, right? It's the same martial arts. It's just different time frames that give you access to a whole different view on it.
Can I ask a question? So piggybacking on that, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. So I'm in total agreement. Obviously, as you train, we're picking on the spinning back kick, but that idea, that technique, I'm sure it's very, very accessible to Sensei Dauphin. I'm positive that it is, right? And he might be able to apply that much more readily than someone else could. But he has the foundation, the basics and that grounding in the basics allows, I would assume, one to know when and where and why that technique right now is the right technique, right? But I just feel like those ideas don't have to be a contradiction, because if you constantly are filtering back to the core essence of, you know, martial arts as a martial art, as something that's going to be applied in the real world, like the basics are always the basics, and so you're still applying that spinning back kick with the mind. Maybe to articulate this a little bit better, I still return back to that same core filter. It's not spinning back kick just for the sake of a spinning back kick. Right now, it has to be applicable in the real world, and it's grounded in those basic techniques.
I like that. What do you think, Sensei Dauphin?
I don't want to pick on spinning back kick. I have a pretty good one.
Better than mine.
But yeah, I don't know. I just always think like if there's a high percentage, like in your basics, that's the high percentage techniques, and you should train those with a higher percentage. I believe that things like the lower percentage techniques primarily came out of competition with other martial artists and people trying to push the envelope and move it forward. And I really find it challenging to think that you would go to this 1800s in Okinawa and find anybody training a jump spinning back kick. And I think that's because they were often training for real world situations, not to compete against another martial artist in a dojo. So I think a lot of those types of techniques evolved out of competition, and one martial artist trying to level up. And I think that's awesome. Like, I think that's an amazing thing about the evolution of martial arts in the last, like, say 200-300 years, where it's gone to. My mind has now gone to just training is when you come in and you train without a curriculum and without core basics. That's just training. You show up and I think, listen, I do BJJ, but I think that's, you can find a lot of BJJ gyms who do that. They just show up, they pick a random technique, they start drilling that random technique, whether it's high percentage or not. And then that's what they do. And better gyms, I think, have a core curriculum of basic things like passing the guard, you know, taking mount, having positions, basic submissions, and they work those a lot more.
That's important though, right? That's because, like, I think there's something to be said for despite lip service, the allocation of time tells you really about the values of the thing, right? So, how come a boxer doesn't learn how to break a clinch? They spend zero or a headlock. It's not a priority. That doesn't mean that boxing doesn't have some applicability to the real world. I'd rather know how to box than not box. The choice between nothing and I'd rather know how to throw a cross hook, uppercut. But the issue can we say it's optimized for self-defense? If you go, how much training time are you allocating to? We know if you take two of the best boxers in the world, they will inevitably end up tied up together. And right, there's an artificial, the referee comes in, break, go again. And they never really spend, I'm speaking generally, but they don't spend the time to learn, how do I create that separation? Well, why would I? It's not a priority. I spend 0 hours allocated in my training time to learning how to break that clinch because the referee's going to do it for me. So even if I say, well, I box, but I apply the filter of self-defense. Well, how much time is allocated to that? You know, you were talking about the BJJ gym. If you're doing the basic submissions over and over and over, basic positions, and you're allotting a lot of time to that, even if you're not giving much lip service to self-defense, it's more valuable to the self-defense than if you talk a lot about self-defense, but then you're doing this thing over here that's really, you couldn't do it if the guy wasn't wearing a lapel and this, and, you know, your foot's got to be, and the distance is such that this guy could hammer fist you in the face, and you're not really accounting for those things, right? I don't know if that's making sense. I think there's a lot to be said for where you're putting your time tells you a lot about what you're prioritizing.
Yeah, you want to see what somebody's good at, watch what they do.
Yeah.
I love that. You're absolutely right. And you're also absolutely right that there are places that maybe flitter about too much. Maybe, you know, train in too many things, dabble in too many things, and not focus in that. Part of it, of course, with new students and young students is you need to capture their attention.
Sure.
Right. And so there are different ways to do that. And how much, the nuance of deciding how much you do with core, you know, if you do jab cross for 90% of every class, some people are going to get bored. So you gotta change stuff up. But a concept that I always refer to is core thematic movements. There are certain movements, large and small, that appear over and over, and those will give each martial artist character, right? So the classical turn in judo, to turn for a forward throw, right? You apply that in many, many techniques, and the little pieces of it, the DNA of that turn, apply all over the place in judo. That's what gives it its characteristic move. And so you got somebody, you know, on the first day I teach, the first month of somebody's training at my dojo, they learn seoi nage, osotogari, the basics, right? They're also going to allocate a huge percentage of their time to those moving forward. And the skill sets that they learn to develop those techniques are going to apply to other techniques. And if I were to say, you have to go out and self-defend tomorrow, what techniques are you going to use? It's probably going to be seoi nage no osotogari, right? In fact, in my life as a youngster growing up in a challenged neighborhood, those are techniques I used all the time. So I know they work, and I see that in the news when somebody's stupid enough to attack a team of guys, collegiate judo players going out for burgers. Guess what they get thrown with? Seoi nage and osotogari. So there's this huge synergy between what you were describing as core movements, efficiency of training, what you're going to apply in self-defense, and this idea that there are certain core movements that exist throughout a system, right? And we're talking about this nexus between all the stuff that starts at the center and goes out to all the different ways you can train in a martial art.
Yeah. Yes.
So train more basics.
Yes.
Listen, I don't know if I'm giving the wrong impression. The spinning back kicks of the world, all that stuff, and Sensei Suino's point about needing to, yeah, as you develop as a martial artist, those lower percentage techniques, it's not lower percentage in the sense that they're not effective if they connect, but the osotogari in judo or in jujitsu, like that's like a front kick. Like you're gonna do that all the time. So this other technique here, like kani basami, right, a scissor throw, where like we do that, we practice that. But if I were to take the number of hours that this technique has been trained versus this technique, you know, again, the time allocated should reflect how many times have I turned into a throw, and whether it's ogoshi or ipan seuinage or morote seuinage, over and over and over and over, versus this other thing that I've also spent a lot of time in, but it's not even, again, the time allocated. It's those fundamental thematic core movements that really have to be the spinal cord of the thing, and then you can expand out, but never lose the connection to that core, because you're trying to learn what's, you know, popular on Instagram or something. I don't know.
I think about when we're talking about self-defense, a lot of the techniques we're talking about don't really need a lot of setup time, right? Like, whereas, again, I don't want this to be the spinning back kick episode, but you really need your opponent to be doing something or not aware. Like, totally, obviously, if somebody's just standing at the bus stop and I walk over there, and they're not prepared, like I can just like leap up, jump, spinning back kick. They're out on the road, knocked out. It's fine, right? But if somebody's coming after you, they're already heightened. You can't get away. You see them coming. Then certain techniques, they don't require a lot of setup. Like just, you know, a right cross, like you said, a low front kick. That doesn't require a lot of setup, and it's not easy for them to see a lot of things happening. I'm sure there's throws. I know there's ground positions that are like that. Like, you know, it's easier to get an arm bar on somebody than it is to, like, you know, take the back and get a rear naked choke or whatever. You know, doing a foot lock on somebody when they're wearing Harley Davidson boots might not be your best self-defense. So I think the basics, if you look at them, they don't need a lot of setup time, a lot of your opponent to do a lot of things to get themselves into the position for you. And that's what dictates the percentage: high percentage, low percentage, yeah. I think.
Sensei Rego, you cracked something open for me when you mentioned Kani Basame. That technique's forbidden in sport judo because it's so dangerous.
Right.
Even though that's a challenging technique to learn, if you're good at it, it is a technique you'd want to learn when your life is at stake. When someone's throwing a knife at you and you get to the outside and you drop a Kani Basame. And why did they ban it? Because people hit it in the back of their head really, really hard, and knees were getting separated, right? So take it out of sport judo, but maybe don't take. So that's a difference between self-defense training and, you know, regular training that was removed, not because, well, it is harder to learn than a seuinage, but not because it's impossible to learn, but because, or not effective, only because it's dangerous.
Actually, that's really informative, right? Where it's like, it's funny when you watch like an MMA fight, right? And these are hardened athletes who are used to being hit, and a guy gets flicked in the eye or kicked in the groin, and he gets a five minutes to recover. And you go, yeah, that stuff.
Right.
That, you know what I mean? Like, again, I don't know that you can devise an entire curriculum on the eye flick, but there is something to that, right? So now you have a guy in a kesagatame or a side control, and you're struggling for this, you know, udegarami or an Americana. It's like, yeah, but hit him in the eye. you know, like don't grab his hair, pound it into the ground if necessary. You know, like don't lose the grittiness of what self-defense on the higher end can be, right? But there is also something to be said that we maybe haven't touched on, that my sensei harped on us all the time, was not only about being a complete martial artist in terms of skill set, but also being able to apply it in a essentially a use of force matrix, an appropriate response, right? So maybe this is a deranged 18-year-old pregnant woman with mental issues. Am I going to crack this woman full power? Do I have the ability to turn down the volume and just control her so she doesn't hurt me, hurt herself, hurt her unborn child? That's you. So it's not just, can I throw someone or hit him with a strong shuto or something, but do I have the ability to just manipulate the human body and control them in such a way where, again, a bully situation with a kid on a playground, does he need to drop elbows down on that kid's head if he can just get in top position? And you know, it just depends, right? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but you have to have, it's not all balls to the wall. You have to have that ability to turn down the volume and turn up the volume with the skill sets as well. Because you know, every situation, you know, as I play with my kids in the dojo, I'll you know, to teach them the idea or to make a silly example to highlight appropriate response training, I'll say, okay, if I speed and the police officer pulls me over, I've broken the law, right, kids? Yeah, sensei, you broke the law. So he gets to shoot me, right? No, of course he doesn't get to shoot you, you know? Or if I go on a murder spree or arson or, you know, rob a bank, does he pull me over and give me a citation? No, there has to be an appropriate, either way, you broke the law, man. You shouldn't have confronted me, attacked me, grabbed me, but I have to have that sense of the scalability of the application of the basic techniques as well. You could drive someone's head through the ground in an osotogari, or you know, someone like Suino Sensei at 7th Dan can put them down like a baby in a crib. You know, you have that ability to put them to sleep one way or put them down to sleep in another sense, you know.
It's funny because you say that, because when we do seminars and people are nervous to take falls, like at the Crucible,
Yeah,
and they'll say to Sensei, I'm nervous to take this fall. Don't ever say that to him, because the next thing he's gonna have a hold of you and you're gonna be on the ground. You won't be nervous anymore.
yeah.
Well, I learned that from my teacher, Walter Todd Sensei. That was his framing. He'd go, "You want to learn how to do that technique?" Right? And
Yeah.
you say yes, and then the next thing you know, right? You're on the floor. We have 3 minutes, my friends. We got to wrap this party up, and it's been amazing so far.
That flew by. Yeah.
Right?
And I'm going to put my American hat on to your questions, your specific questions about the pregnant lady and the kid in the playground. I'm going to put my American hat on and say,
Yeah.
I plead the Fifth Amendment. And I don't want to answer the question.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up then, Sensei, on that, being able to scale your ability to handle a situation, what are your thoughts on that?
Is that
Sensei you're asking?
Suino Sensei?
Sensei Suino, yes.
Okay.
Listen, I used to teach the law of self-defense, and in Michigan, we have something which is basically called level of force, right? Like you have to have an appropriate level of force in your response. You have to be able to moderate how you respond. And so that's not only true ethically, it's also true legally, that if you exceed the level of force called for in dealing with a threat, then you are going to end up facing the consequences of the law. So you have to be able to moderate your techniques in order to comply with the law. I'd rather be sitting in a courtroom having my case made to a jury than be dead. But by and large, right? And the other thing is, as advanced martial artists, it's up to us to be good role models. So we need to espouse good values, good ethical values, and we need to be able to show that we can train our students to live into those values in their lives, in their dojos, and in their self-defense.
Yeah, before we wrap this, what I want to say, Rego Sensei, is Sensei Legacy always said, you know, we talked about it this beginning, like play out scenarios. What is going to cause you to respond? Like, what is your list of things? Like, if you do these things, I will respond, and it probably will not be a pleasant response for you, the receiver of my response. When I was like a Shodan and like 26 years old, I have such a long list that I would have like done stuff to you for. And now,
Yeah.
now as a highly trained martial artist in 52, it's a lot smaller list. Like you have to be coming in the window of my house at 2 o'clock in the morning. You have to be doing something to one of my family members. You have to be like coming after me in a very aggressive manner. You know, I've told since, you know, I've had situations where a young guy got out and started chirping at me. And when I was 26, I would have for sure popped that guy.
Halfway looking to, right? Oh, there's my
Yeah. And at 52, I just looked at him, let him like run his mouth and said, look, son, you and I both know nothing's going to happen here. You should just get in your truck and drive away. And he did. He just got in his, and since, you know, said that was the best possible response. And I was like, but kind of a part of me wishes I could have popped him too. Right.
Yeah,
So,
right.
we're done, Sensei. Just
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
How do you want to wrap this up for us, Sensei Rego?
Listen, I think in summary, I think we know that the spinning back kick is shit. We've established that. Not no, I don't know why the spinning back kick got picked on, but anyway, no, my final thoughts are, I think I love the martial arts. I absolutely am infatuated and in love, but I think that again, we cannot divorce or allow too much space to grow between what these arts were designed for and how they're being trained. And I think the easiest way to there's many training modalities, but if nothing else, keep to the basics. The basics will take you a very, very, very long way. And they're the basics for a reason. They're time tested. It's not because they're popular. It's because they work. And if you stick to the basics, you're for the most part going to be okay. Apply that mental filter and enjoy the training.
Thanks so much for your time, Sensei.
Thank you guys. I appreciate
Thanks,
the
gentlemen.
invitation. Thank
Great
you.
to talk to you.
Cheers, everybody.